That's what we said we would do. You know?
Yeah.
That's what we said we would do.
Still got after this, because I've already let Cheryl have it at this point.
Yeah.
All these things that we've said, necessarily, it's like, you know what, it wouldn't be unnecessary. You could just tell us the truth from the get-go. That's important. So why all that misinformation?
The alternative is just
Good morning. Can I get everybody to please sit down as I tell my kids, zip lip. You're not kids, it was a joke. I wanted to get your attention. Thank you, welcome for being here today to the 13th Congressional District Convention. A couple of housekeeping. We have food. If you're going to bring your food, make sure you throw your trash away. Number one, keep this place clean so we won't have to pay extra fees. We have a speaker for you while our credentials committee is in process, getting the credentials. So while that's being done, I do want to welcome everyone for being here and thank you. And before I call this meeting to order, I'd like to have Sam come and speak. Or do I call it to order and then you speak, right? Yes, so where's my gavel? This meeting is called to order. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce my dear friend, someone who I chaired his campaign in Henry County, someone who I helped. My garage was full of signs, and I made sure that did what on my part to get him elected. So we have become really close and dear friends. And it's not easy to get your state attorney general to show up for a convention. So when I asked him without hesitation, he said, I'll be there. So, you know, that means a lot to me. So he's a great man, a conservative, man of principle, family values, and I want you to hear from him personally today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my dear friend Sam Hollins, your State Attorney General.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I do disagree with what Sahar said. I think when you're elected statewide, you're supposed to be everywhere in the state as often as you can. So when she asked me, I thought the answer was you just say yes. Last night I was in the 14th up in Dalton. After this, I'll go to the 6th in Dunwoody. I think we have an obligation to show up other than when it's election time for ourselves. So. Thank you. So I thought I'd talk about a couple issues in my office that you're interested in. I know you're not interested in each of the 22 or so thousand matters that we have in front of the office, but we have a bunch involving our president and the federal government, so I thought I would talk a couple minutes about that. First of all, as you know, this president has started a war against the coal industry, and of course Georgia is one of those states where a lot of our energy comes from coal. So we have 4 lawsuits at present against the EPA. We have about 3 others where we're on the amicus of other litigation. Our state implementation plan for air quality was rejected when they came forward with this rule called the cross-state air pollution rule. That is cap and trade by regulation when the president couldn't get that passed in Congress. So EPA created a set of rules that would have a group of us. And it's a really interesting geographic area. It's Nebraska, Texas, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida. And we are to trade credits to stay compliant with federal law. The problem is all of us need to get credits, which makes it really hard to figure out who you would trade with. So it's a difficult challenge. So we're in DC. That will go to a hearing in the DC Circuit Court the middle of April, and hopefully we will throw out that rule. Hardly ever does the EPA have a rule thrown out, but we're seeing a lot of rules being promulgated as quickly as possible this year. because as you know, it's far harder to repeal a rule than to pass a rule, so we're involved in a lot of that process. Secondly, the legislature last year did pass House Bill 87, the immigration bill. 23 sections to that bill. As soon as it was passed and signed, I knew, of course, that we'd be defending the law. I didn't know at the time that I'd be a defendant in that lawsuit, but I am. So the long and short of it is they filed some really interesting groups. My favorite was People for the American Way. I still don't know who they are, but they've got a cute little name. SEIU, you know who SEIU is. So anyway, they sued 23 sections. Judge Thrash upheld 21. 2 sections were stayed. That being harboring and transporting of illegal immigrants, and whether law enforcement, upon probable cause, had the right to inquire further about immigration status. Putting that in English, that means that if the sheriff or the police officer stops a car lawfully, they've already done something in order for that stop to occur, and they don't have a driver's license and they can't show you their name, the law enforcement officer is not supposed to ask other questions. That is absurd. You know, if I go to Kohl's right over here and give them a check, they want more than that in order for me to buy something in Kohl's, just like a photo ID is fully appropriate when you go to the ballot. So as you know, the federal government has sued Alabama, Utah, South Carolina, Arizona. We've had conversations with the federal government due to the way our law has been passed. They have not sued Georgia. It's been the folks like SEIU and People for the American Way. But when you sit there and say, well, you know, how about doing a pilot to have something better than the H-2A program for our agricultural industry, the comment is, we're not interested in a pilot, we're interested in suing. So they're busy with their suits. Our case went to the 11th Circuit. We will hear probably in July on that case. The Arizona case goes to the Supreme Court this month, and that will come out the end of June. So everyone will wait for the Arizona decision first. One side issue before I get to the big issue, you're here in the 13th Congressional District because something very special happened the end of last year, the Friday before Christmas. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. It treats 9 states as being guilty, and then they've got to prove themselves innocent. You happen to live in one of those 9. This is the very first time that the Justice Department administratively approved all of our State House, State Senate, and Congressional District maps. Heretofore, every decade. Thank you. Heretofore, every decade, we were in suit this time of year, and y'all would be meeting, but you wouldn't know whether you would in fact have qualifying when you have qualifying, and then you'd have voting July 31. So Ann Lewis, who's the counsel for the Republican Party, who assisted us in that suit with my office, we were all pleased that for the very first time we got all the maps passed the way the legislature passed them. Finally, let's talk a little bit about something that you may have seen in the news lately about called Obamacare. I thought maybe you saw it in the news. And I had the honor of being at 3 of the 4 arguments in the Supreme Court. One day I was not there because I needed to come back to the next to last day of the session for my legislative agenda. And I'll tell you, that was very historic. Very, very interesting, whether you're a lawyer or not a lawyer. When you look in the courtroom and you see some of the justices' spouses in attendance, that tells you that it's a special case. That tells you that it really is an historic argument, and that decades from now, law students will be talking about this case. That was started in Florida and Pensacola. There are 26 states. Georgia, of course, is one of the 26. In the court in Florida, the individual mandate, the thing that says if you don't buy insurance, you pay a penalty, was stricken, and Judge Vincent threw out the whole act. In the 11th Circuit, we were looking at a problem because we had 2 Democrat-appointed judges and 1 Republican-appointed judge, and heretofore, no Democrat-appointed judge had ruled against the administration on Obamacare. But after the argument, we got one of those Democrat-appointed judges, so by 2 to 1, the individual mandate was once again stricken. Additionally, they threw out the guaranteed issue in the community ratings, that is the age 26 and the pre-existing condition clause. And that case, of course, was just tried in the Supreme Court. The first day, was on the 1867 Anti-Injunction Act, which put in English just means, can you bring the lawsuit before you start paying the penalty or the tax? And it's clear that the court is going to hear this matter on the merits, so that is great. Day 2 was on the individual mandate, and day 2, the justices asked really tough questions, as you'd imagine, but they asked those tough questions of both sides, so that was fine. Day 3, to me, was the most interesting day. There were 2 arguments. The one in the morning was on severability. If you strike the individual mandate, what happens to the rest of the 2,700 pages? And the afternoon was the expansion of Medicaid. The states claimed that roughly half the people that would be subject to coverage under Obamacare do so under expansion of Medicaid. I don't know about your community, but in my community, you can't get a doctor to take new Medicaid patients, so I don't know what we do with an additional 650 to 750,000 folks that we dumb down healthcare for at that point. So the morning, severability, I'll give you one quote. Some of you have heard me say it before. Justice Breyer asked the Deputy Solicitor General whether or not he and our lawyer, Paul Clement, who was Bush 43 Solicitor General, lawyer for the country, should decide what goes in and out and give them that draft if they strike the individual mandate. And in my opinion, the Deputy Solicitor General gave the wrong answer. He said no. Because as a lawyer, when your ship is potentially sinking, save whatever you can. But he said no. So when Paul Clement got up there, he said, well, you know, I'm sorry, I take that back. So after he said no, Justice Scalia, who was as brilliant as he is witty, said, well, I think it would be a violation of the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment for me or my law clerks to have to read those 2,700 pages and decide what stays or what goes. And then as we finished chuckling, Justice Kagan said, my law clerk will volunteer. So that tells you where she is. When we got to the expansion of Medicaid argument in the afternoon, we were in the front of the room, not because we were parties, but because we were members of the Supreme Court bar. If you're admitted to the Supreme Court, there's a section of seats for all the arguments for those individuals. If you are a party or a guest, you are in the back of the room. So we were there, and I looked back and I saw Al Franken, and I thought that was sort of interesting that that's the argument he wanted to come to. I didn't have a long talk with him, as you'd imagine. Didn't have any talk with him. But Justice Breyer, once again, one of the liberal justices asked our lawyer, well, clearly the HHS secretary would really not void a state's Medicaid if a state chose not to accept this new program, which cost the state $2.5 billion over the first decade. And Paul Clement said, well, that's exactly what was threatened to Nebraska with the CHIP program, the Children's Healthcare Program. So it's a really good threat and an inappropriate threat. So Justice Breyer said, yeah, but they settled it and Nebraska has CHIP. And Chief Justice Roberts, who didn't say a lot the day before on individual mandate, said, well, it's a pretty good threat, isn't it? You know, the fact of the matter is you have a gun to your head. You take the new program or you lose everything else. So that's why it was settled, which I thought was really, really telling, because that was the first time we had heard from the Chief Justice his concerns about the issue. And then Justice Kennedy had similar comments in that regard. So as you, I'm sure, have read, the liberal press is freaking out because the arguments went well for us. But one of the first things lawyers will tell you is you don't count votes based on questions in an argument. So while you'd much rather have a smile on your face that you think the argument went well than you think you got toasted, you really don't know the answer till you read the decision. June 28th is the last day that the Supreme Court issues orders or opinions this term. So I assume June 28th at 9 o'clock, we'll get notice, or at 10 o'clock rather, we'll get notice that they've issued the opinion. I assume it will be hundreds of pages between the concurring and dissenting opinions. I hope to be on the side with 5. I can count 4 I don't have. So 5 is probably the best I can do. And then hopefully we will have the 5 and to strike Obamacare. Having said that, y'all are here at a district convention, and then many of you will be in Columbus for the state convention. And I know many of you had different first choices for who the Republican nominee should be. Let me plead with you that at the end of today, y'all are united, because the issue, quite frankly, isn't who our nominee is. The issue is that Barack Obama not be in the White House next January. I will be the first to tell you I was not a John McCain fan. I will be the first to tell you I'm still not a John McCain fan. But I'll be the first to tell you I'll take him any day of the week, any time before who we have now. And many of us didn't have the passion and then go to our neighbors and get them to vote for McCain over President Obama. And now that we've seen his agenda, and from my perspective, when I tell you about the federal litigation I'm involved in on behalf of your state, if he wins re-election and doesn't have to worry about re-election again, I'm going to get attacked by more federal agency directives taking away our liberty and our freedom. So we need to understand that the battle's not today, and the battle is not anything other than the November election to throw out this president and to bring back liberty to our country. So it's my honor to be with you all. I hope that everything goes and progresses nicely today, and that everything proceeds to the convention in Columbus well. It's my honor to be with you all. God bless you, and thank you very much. I don't know who this is, but it's not mine. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Okay, our credentials are still working. It looks like almost everyone showed up. That's great. I love that. Instead of you guys just sitting around, I'd like to go ahead and start with the first thing, which is our Pledge of Allegiance, if it's all right with everyone. And I'd like to go ahead and have, well, that's what I'm going to do until credentials is ready. So Mark Alacon, if you could come please and lead us into the pledge. Mark Alacon is our Stockbridge City Councilman.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and recognize those who are...
Do we not have an invitation on the agenda?
Kathy, you are out of order. Thank you.
No, she's not.
You're out of order.
I appeal to the body.
Sergeant at Arms, please escort Miss Kathy Gilbert. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort Miss Kathy Gilbert. Sergeant at Arms, Jimmy Golden, Patrick. Thank you. Thank you. And where are my officers? Those who are screaming and shouting and saying no, escort them as well. Thank you.
We're all leaving. We're all leaving.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please sit down. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the lady, please.
I'm not leaving.
Maybe you need, you're not leaving out of the convention. You're going out to cool off.
I'm close. I just don't understand what...
No shouting. You are not recognized. You're out of order. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's try to have a peaceful convention. Can we? Again, we are all Americans. Okay? We are all Americans. We are, let me give a speech, all right? Because I do have a speech, but I'll do it now. Let me tell you, we are here for one reason. To get our country back. We are here all for one common goal. Let your personalities, your personal issues out the door. Today, you come for one reason. So if you are thinking about shouting and screaming, before you do that, you think about the reason why we're here. Now let me tell you a few things about me as your chairman. I was born in Afghanistan. That's where I'm from. And I was brought here at age 10 by Ronald Reagan. My dad helped Ronald Reagan during the Russian war. So I was brought here. I didn't understand, and I didn't know what Ronald Reagan was. If he was a Republican or if he was a Democrat, I didn't understand politics. So for me, I didn't even understand freedom. All I knew that I was in a country that I don't have to shake with sweat every night in bed, that I don't hear bombs going off, that I don't hear the Russians with the military coming knocking on door with their guns, pointing in my dad and mom's head. I kissed the ground when I came from the airplane down and I walked out, because I felt now I'm in heaven. I looked at America and I looked at this country as heaven. So as I grew up, going through school, going through college, I learned the process. I actually had to take 100 test questions to become a citizen. And my citizen officer said, you have to know every question, otherwise you will not pass the test. So I studied and made sure I knew all those 100 questions. And I took that test. And yes, my father is Muslim, my family is Muslim. But I didn't understand Islam really. I didn't understand the religion, I didn't understand anything. Because I grew up mostly trying to hide from getting bombed every day and the earthquakes of Afghanistan. So I didn't have time to learn the religion. So I didn't know very much about it. So what happened was, my father, we came to Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where we felt that it was more like Afghanistan. So anyhow, long story short, I became citizen. The day that I became citizen, I took an oath to protect this country, fight for this country. This is my country. I will fight, I will die for this country. So when I learned the process, I said, what can I do to give back? My father gives tons of money to the RNC, so what can I do? The only greatest thing that I can do for this country is to give my time, to give back for the freedom to be here, to standing where I am, to be in the position that I am. You just don't know what an honor it is to be where I am. Do you know where I came from and where I am now? This is America. Anything is possible. Anything. You dream, and your dream will come true. So don't let anything get in your way. So think about it before you stand up and shout and misbehave. I've asked you, I actually beg you, in Christ's name, our Lord Jesus Christ, to behave, and to understand that we're here for one common cause. And yes, I did become a Christian. I did. So, hallelujah. Without being that said, I will go ahead and turn the mic into a wonderful friend who is going to lead this delegation into a prayer. Nancy Fabry.
May we pray. Almighty God, we come humbly into your presence. We thank you for your countless blessings.